Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Standalone, where we go from being ordinary to extraordinary. And what we're really talking about is leadership in our lives. You know, when you're a leader, sometimes we get this rare circumstance where we meet a leader of leaders, and that's who we have in our presence today. Dr. Will Cole is one of the first functional practitioners of medicine to actually start in the telehealth realm and really get this going pre-COVID. And so just for that mindset, to have that foresight, to see that is something incredible. And I want to talk about that today. But Dr. Will Cole, you have an amazing podcast, The Art of Being Well. You're a New York Times seller, best-selling author, Ketotarian, which we'll talk about a little bit today. The Inflammation Spectrum, another great book, which I read and I love it. I think this is a much needed conversation. And then you have intuitive fasting. You have a new book coming out, which is really exciting. And I think never before are we understanding this connection of the mind and our performance, but then how that goes back to our diet, which I want to dig into today. So I want to say thank you for your time. Thank you for your innovative genius. Thank you for being a leader in the world of medicine. And I want us to just kick this off. Like, what is the difference between functional medicine and conventional medicine so we can start moving along? What gave you that insight to start moving in that direction?
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. I love what I get to do. It's a passion of mine. It's a sacred responsibility for me to be a part of people's health journey, and I take that extremely seriously for me. And if I had to sort of delineate between functional medicine and conventional medicine or mainstream medicine, I use the word mainstream medicine, but I think functional medicine is becoming more mainstream, which is really great. But as you mentioned, I started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers over 12 years ago at this point. So I've been doing telehealth, like we're talking right now, for a long time.
That's amazing.
And that's still what I do. 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm in this room. I get out once in a while to see my kids and wife, but I love what I get to do. It's such an honor to be a part of people's health journey. So the first thing that we do differently in functional medicine, number one, we interpret labs using a thinner reference range. So anybody that's listening to this or watching this will know, and hey, when I get my labs, there's my number on my lab, and then there's this reference range, this X to Y interval of numbers that I'm being compared to. Well, we get that reference range from a statistical bell curve average of the population of that specific lab. And if you go to different labs, you will see those reference ranges will oftentimes vary from lab to lab. They're largely not standardized. People that are typically going to labs are people with health problems, sadly. So there's a lot of people that know intuitively something's not right here. My fatigue, my anxiety, my weight loss resistance, my different inflammatory symptoms, my digestive problems, my hair loss. These are things not normal, but they go to the doctor, they get the basic labs ran, and they're told many, many, many times, hey, your labs are pretty normal. Maybe you're just depressed. Here's an antidepressant. Or maybe you're just getting older. Or maybe you're just stressed out. Or they go through medical gaslighting and made you feel like they're crazy for having these symptoms, despite these quote unquote normal labs. Just because something's common doesn't necessarily mean it's normal. And to compare yourself with people that have health problems is no way for you to find out why you feel the way that you do. So in functional medicine, we're looking at optimal, not average. Where does vibrant wellness reside? That's a tighter interval of numbers within that larger reference range. That's the functional range, where your body is functioning the best. So we're looking at optimal, not average. We're running more comprehensive labs in functional medicine to get to the root cause of why you're going through these health issues. So it's based off of health history, but we want to look at things like underlying gut problems or chronic infections or nutrient deficiencies or hormonal imbalances or environmental toxins or biotoxins like mold toxins we see a lot. And mental emotional trauma and how that impacts the physiological body, like our physical health. So it's typically a confluence of factors that we have to be thorough to figure out what are the pieces to the puzzle of why you feel the way that you do. And then another third aspect of functional medicine is bioindividuality. We're all different, and there's not going to be a cookie cutter one size fits all approach to getting well. And, you know, when we do that, a lot of people fall through the cracks of that sort of reductive view of healthcare, the complexity of somebody's uniqueness, because you could have 100 people with a set of symptoms, like using low thyroid as an example, right? There's a lot of possibilities of why somebody's thyroid is low. They could be Hashimoto's disease or autoimmune thyroiditis. It could be an underconversion of T4 to T3. It could be something called high reverse T3 syndrome. You could have a brain-based hypothalamic pituitary thyroid axis issue. The point being is we see the symptom of low thyroid symptoms like fatigue, hair loss, weight loss resistance, feeling cold. Those are like check engine lights. Okay, the check engine light's on in the car, but why is it on in the first place? It's not a medication deficiency. So let's figure out why we have the problem in the first place, but tailor it and curate it to the individual. So bio-individuality really is at the heart of what we do. So we use food as medicine. We use natural medicines. We use different biohacking tools. We use medications when needed. We use mind-body practices, therapy, trauma therapy, somatic practices, EMDR, to really get to the root cause. So that's what functional medicine is.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. You know, when you talk about being optimal, I think it's so important because a large part of my audience are, you know, business owners, entrepreneurs. We're looking always to optimize, and we don't put any attention into our health until we take off and we start doing really well. If you could speak to this, because you talk a lot about inflammation, if you could just define, you know, why, you know, chronic disease is such a problem in America, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's something that is gradual, and for people to know when they're looking to live their optimal life, they don't have to have an optimal circumstance for them to start pursuing it. I saw in one of your posts, you had someone reach out to you and say like, oh, this is great for people that have money. And you were like, no, my practice is in Pittsburgh. You know, I work with like high-end individuals. You know, you have fans that are like world renowned, but your practice is based on helping people, not just high-end, low income, but just people in general. If you could speak to this about, you know, the human nature of us to wait until this happens to get better. We don't want to get to a place where it's too late. So
Yeah.
if you could talk on this, that would be so great for people to hear from you.
Thank you. I love that you saw my little clap back to somebody, you know,
Yeah, I
and I
love it.
normally don't respond, but I'm like, you know what? I have to correct this. This is easy
You
enough.
didn't respond to Gwyneth Paltrow, but you responded to this person, which I loved about you.
I love Gwyneth too, but you know, I had to fix that. I had to fix that misinformation. The reality is, look, that's a lot to unpack, but I think the first thing is, you mentioned like the people that listen to your podcast, that be entrepreneurs, go-getters, people that are in startup land. Like those are my people. Like my top patient base are profession-wise, actually, are nurses, school teachers, engineers, and entrepreneurs. Like that's my people. They are the people that are extremely serious about their health. They have a common love of spreadsheets and getting to the root cause and optimizing and wanting to feel best and wanting to give their best with the things that they're passionate about and the bandwidth that they have to do what they're going to do. And I see so many entrepreneurs, business people, people in startups that are, for a season of their life, they're really putting their health on the back burner, and they know intuitively this is not sustainable. My burnout, my fatigue, my anxiety, my resilience is just like weakening to a place of like, it can get scary for some of them because they are high performing people. And then when they start to see their bandwidth decrease, they know they have to do something different to feel something different. So that's who we're used to talking to online. And that's when we run the labs and get them answers as to why they feel the way that they do. But that's 99% of my patients are people that have to budget, or people that have to plan, people that have to, they're busy people. They're not people that are just sitting in the kitchen, like thinking about their wellness all day. They have a full lineup of stuff on their plate, proverbially speaking. So that's really the heart of what my work is. And I think it's easy for people on social media or the average American to say, well, okay, well, functional medicine's just for the wealthy or the famous people. But that's not been my experience in 12 years. Like you mentioned, like I live in Pittsburgh. I'm in a blue collar town with a lot of rural and urban food deserts. Not that most of my patients are here, but I see people in my neighborhoods like mine around the country and around the world. They are people in middle America or people that are in food deserts that don't have access to everything within wellness, but they want, because of telehealth, we can get them access to this information. So inflammation is a problem that impacts anybody, no matter what your socioeconomic background is. Inflammation is the commonality between just about every health problem under the sun, from autoimmune conditions to metabolic issues, hormonal problems, fatigue issues. And a lot of my work is really just educating people on the fact that mental health is not separate from physical health. Mental health is physical health, and our brain is a part of our body. So things like anxiety and depression and brain fog, like word recall, name recall issues, fatigue, are inflammatory too. They're neuroinflammatory. They're brain inflammation. So we wield a lot of agency over these things. And that's sort of the dichotomy of this. While it's impacting so many people, chronic inflammation, we can do a lot to arrest that and calm it down and live a vibrant life and do the things, live the life you were created for, whether that be your business or your family, your friends, all of the above. That's what that's what my passion is, to give people the ability to live the life that they are passionate for. And so many people settle for feeling lousy because they think just because it's their everyday, they should settle for it. Or I'm just stressed and that's just the way that I am. And and they're waiting for this perfect utopian time in the future to prioritize their health. If you're waiting for the right time, it's now, because there's always going to be something in your life. And then months turn into years turns into decades. And then you look back in your life, you're like, why am I just pushing through to get through the day? And I see so many people just pushing through to get through the day. And it's not even a good quality day because their nervous system is constantly in that sympathetic fight or flight stress state that they end up like living for the weekend and living to drink in the evenings. And it's like such a bleak existence. And there's so much more to life than that.
I love that you're saying this, and for you to just tie this in to what we really need to do, because it's about gaining control back of our life. If you could explain to our audience, what is inflammation? Because a lot of us think, well, I can walk fine. I'm okay. Like I don't have any crippling issues right now. Well, you could have like a smaller level of inflammation that could be growing. And then how does that, transfer into a chronic illness over a long period of time? If you could explain that when you talk about that in your book, the, inflammation spectrum, I love that, because so many of us, it's little things that we're enduring through. And a lot of us have this business mindset, just like overcome it, override it. But we can also fix what the actual issue is and not have to spend that unnecessary energy just overriding it or ignoring it, essentially, is what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I think a part of the initial stages of people overcoming these things that they're settling for or pushing through is realizing it's even an issue. Because I think so many people, because they are distracted and busy, and our culture kind of breeds distraction and busyness, that I really would empower the person that's listening or watching this to really get rooted in their body and take inventory of how they feel. And that's why I started out that book, The Inflammation Spectrum, with a quiz that I adapted from questions that I ask patients when I'm consulting them via a telehealth consultation. And we actually have that quiz for free at drwokol.com too. And they can just take it to go through the different systems of the body to see where they may lie on this inflammation spectrum. And, by the time somebody's diagnosed with a health problem, whether it be type 2 diabetes and another, metabolic syndrome or an autoimmune condition or something else like this, right? Researchers estimate it's about 4 to 10 years prior to that diagnosis when things were brewing on this inflammation spectrum. That's 4 to 10 years of our life that people are like, okay, my fatigue, I'm pushing through, or my weight loss resistance, I'm just pushing through, or these check engine lights, my body's telling me something, but I'm just kind of putting it on the back burner. So no matter where you're at on the inflammation spectrum, my message to you would be, what can you do today to start to move the needle in the positive direction? So there's three main stages, if you will, on this inflammation spectrum that I write about and talk to patients about. One end, it's the inflammation that's silent. It's the silent inflammation, and the silent autoimmune reactivity is another way of putting it. And then the second is inflammation reactivity or autoimmune reactivity, meaning they have symptoms, but they are, in some labs are off, but they don't necessarily check all the boxes. Going back to silent inflammation, that's if you can run labs for people that have high inflammation markers and the person feels fine. That's silent, right? There's many people that these are asymptomatic things, and you just do a routine screening of things and you catch things and they can do something about it. I don't often get to see people like that, but I see a lot of people in this inflammation reactivity, meaning they have the fatigue, they have the weight loss resistance, they have the digestive problems, they have the brain fog, the hormonal problems, but they don't necessarily check all the boxes to be stage 3 on this inflammation spectrum, which is the full-blown diagnosable health problem, whether that be type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions, like a anxiety disorder, something like that. Someone that has an ICD-10 diagnosis code. But again, 4 to 10 years prior to that stage 3, that diagnostic level, things were somewhere on this inflammation continuum. So that's no matter where you're at, if you're on one end or the other, there's a lot of influence that you wield on your physiology. And that's really what we focus on. But it's checking in with your body, like looking at your energy levels. Where am I like having to live off of caffeine and sugar to get through the day? Do I have this background anxiety? Do I always feel, people describe it as feeling wired and tired? Like I'm exhausted, but I'm anxious. I have trouble winding down in the evening. Do you have insatiable cravings? Do you have, is your skin, look, do you get breakouts? Do you have skin inflammation? Do you have hair loss? Do you have digestive problems? Like we talk about bowel movements pretty quick in my relationship with my patients, because that's a good window into your body as well. We say, it's normal as far as the Bristol chart, which is sort of the gold standard to look at bowel movements, but you want 1 to 2 snakes a day as far as bowel movements. That's the formation of it. And if you're going less than that, or if you're like going every 2 or 3 days with a bowel movement, or it's always loose, or it's really strained, that's a window. These are check engine lights that something's not right here. Do you have difficulty losing weight? Do you crave sugary or salty things? These are all signs that you're somewhere on this inflammation spectrum and your body's trying to tell you, but you have to pay attention to do something about it.
Yeah, this is powerful. You talk about the elimination diet, which I think is incredibly important for people to start, paying attention to. And I love this term. I've only heard you speak about this, bio-individuality, knowing what is really unique to you, especially, with me having 3 children. My eldest child, he can get away with eating like a bunch of nonsense sometimes, but if my middle child eats that, it's instant inflammation and gut issues. And so I know that it's all wrong. So I wanted to ask you, like, what are some things that we can say that are just really hard no's, or is there such a thing? And because there is that bio individuality, and I love that you talk about different seasons, right, of for our health. But like, what are some things, if I'm starting to get interested about my health right now, what are some things, like, 4 things that I could quickly steer away from and just start to notice an improvement in my overall health? Because, Dr. Will, working with so many people, I get a great opportunity to have like a large sample size to do a lot of like, what's going on here? And there is definitely something funky in the air right now. And I really believe that it's tied to what people are eating, like the sharpness of people. You talk about this, the cognitive decline. I'm seeing this and I'm thinking there's also like social media that's fracturing our attention. but I don't think our diet is helping. So what could be like 4 hard no's, if there is such a thing, that we could veer away from to start walking towards an optimal version of ourselves?
Yeah. I I would say this is that ultimately speaking, I'm going to give the most common ones that I see, and then I'll give a little caveat to it because of bioindividuality, right? There's always exceptions to the rule, and there's a lot of nuance to these conversations. But every food we eat either feeds inflammation or fights it. There's no Switzerland meal. There's no neutral food that's doing nothing for your physiology. So these are what I would call the inflammatory core four as far as foods are concerned. And from that, I would say decreasing or eliminating these foods would behoove the average human being that's listening to this. And I would say also too, that because of bioindividuality, that's not all or nothing. Some people can handle a certain level of this because the average human body is pretty resilient to things, resilient to different stressors. But these are things to at least take inventory of. Number one would be added sugar, which most people listening to this would know that. But even the nice sounding, healthier sounding euphemisms for sugar, right? And it sounds like more natural, like, coconut sugar or agave nectar. It sounds like they just squeezed the agave and like poured it
Yes.
into this cup. It's like, but it's still high processed and high fructose. And it's like, we're talking about added sugar, like not in a whole food form, not like a fruit or a vegetable that's starchy or something like that. It is actually like processed, refined, even if it's originally from a plant, it's been highly processed and added. Without fiber, I should say, as well, which sort of buffers the sugar, the glucose spike. So look at added sugar, look at the grams and the amount of sugar. I almost feel like it's a great mindfulness practice to kind of check in with your body, maybe track for a week or so and what does a typical week in the life look like, and take a sugar audit, if you will, of how much sugar you're having throughout the day. The average American should be, depending on how active they should be having 150 grams or less of sugar a day. And that's on the higher end, honestly, in my opinion. You could probably even do 100 or less. If you're less active, you probably are going to get away with less. If you're more active, you could have a little bit more. There's bioindividuality there. But people would be surprised at how much carbs, which break down into sugar, and added sugars they're actually having in a day. That'd be number one. Number two would be gluten-containing grains, like wheat, rye, barley, spelt, mainly wheat. And the caveat there is you can make it the argument that it's what we've done to the grain supply and less to do about the grains themselves. When you're looking about genetic modification and hybridization and glyphosate's implication in these things as far as the herbicides and pesticides, Roundups, presence within most grain supply. But, throughout human history, we used grains oftentimes because of it stored well during times of famine. So we're feasting on famine foods year round. It's like out of alignment with what humans would have had for a long time. And then it's how we prepare it. Like, is it soaked? Is it sprouted? Or is it not? Is it highly refined? So it's a nuanced conversation, but for the sake of simplicity, just looking at gluten-containing grains, because the gluten protein, which is the actual type of protein that's within those grains, is just genetically different than what humans would have eaten thousands of years ago. So if you look at different ancient grains, it's molecularly quite different. So it's a different beast. And a lot of researchers are looking at what they call an epigenetic genetic mismatch, or this evolutionary mismatch, when the world around us has changed so much in such a finite period of time, when you're putting that into context with the totality of human history. And then our genetics haven't really changed in 10,000 years. So our DNA is really living in a brave new world in many ways, and it's triggering these genetic predispositions that have laid dormant for thousands of years, but are being awoken, being triggered like never before in human history because of this onslaught of epigenetic or environmental, i.e. the foods that we eat and the air we breathe and the water we drink and the soil we grow our food in, is quite disrupted and quite changed and distorted over the course of the last 50, 75 years or so. And even less so, you really could tie a lot of this into the 90s. Since the 1990s, a lot has changed as far as glyphosate's presence in grain supply. So looking at grains, number three would be industrial seed oils. Again, things like canola oil, vegetable oil, soybean oil. These are originally from plants, but they're so processed and refined and really very sensitive to light and heat, and can be quite oxidized and a source of inflammation and a disruption to the microbiome, the human microbiome, which is all the trillions of bacteria in our gut, which is where 75% of our immune system is. It's the heart of where inflammation resides, is in the gut. And it's also, interestingly enough, where 95% of serotonin and 50% of dopamine, our neurotransmitters, are made and stored in the gut. In our second brain is what the researchers refer to our gut as. So a lot of people's mental health issues like anxiety and depression and brain fog really has to do with their gut health, their second brain health. And if they got their second brain healthy, if they got their gut healthy, their mental health issues, their brain health issues would subside in the vast majority of people, I dare say. So that would be the third one, the industrial seed oils. And the fourth would be conventional dairy. So what I mean by that is just like the average like milk that's in the cartons at the supermarket. You can certainly get better forms of dairy, like grass-fed, organic, fermented dairies, even like kefirs or cheeses or things like that, yogurts that are grass-fed, organic. The fermentation tends to break down the casein or the dairy protein and the lactose and the dairy sugars. But it's what we've done to the cows in the world, right? We're feeding them grains that they were meant to be grazing on grass, and then it's the type of grains that they're eating, which I already mentioned is not really healthy either. And the cows are unhealthy, and then therefore that's impacting humans and what they're eating. So it's really a conversation about this inflammatory core 4. A lot of it has to do with an environmental conversation, and we're just a microcosm of the larger ecosystem. And as there's climate change going on globally, there's physiological climate change in the form of chronic inflammation. And that's really, as above, so below, as they say. We're really seeing a disruption of our microbiome. And we are seeing, when you look at the research around regenerative farming and what's going on with the soil microbiome, the larger microbiome is disrupted as well.
Yeah, this is 100% correct. I wanted to ask you, what made you get into telehealth medicine, when you did? Because I think it's, it's genius that you did this. And this was also like sometimes things just make sense, right? And necessity causes us to innovate, but you had the foresight to think about this. What made you do this? And then I also wanted to ask, a follow-up question with, where do you see the future of medicine going? Because I think that's an important question, because a lot of us are getting better educated today, thank goodness, because of telehealth and because of doctors like you that put out this great information.
Thank you. To be honest with you, when we first started telehealth 12 years ago, we didn't even have the language for telehealth. We called it a virtual functional medicine clinic, or an online functional medicine clinic, because there was no language for telehealth. So for a lot of years, that's what we called it, a virtual or online functional medicine clinic, because that was kind of descriptive of what we did. And it was really born out of necessity. I was one of the early people talking online about functional medicine. I was just passionate about it and writing a lot about it and talking about it online. And there are people in different states and countries that wanted access to this, that knew what I was talking about was what they were experiencing. And they really resonated with what I was talking about. And they wanted access to this. We had to figure it out. We had to figure out all the hoops to jump through to get them access to this information, to provide them that support and guidance, not replacing their primary care physician, not replacing their local doctor, but providing them functional medicine guidance and coaching them and guiding them and giving them tools to improve their quality of life. So it's only grown since then. And obviously, like, my team's a lot bigger and all that stuff, but I'm still doing the same thing. Like, I'm really a creature of habit in many ways. And basically my life hasn't changed in 12 years and what my main focus is. So it was no master plan other than I just saw like what people that I think the best way that I could put it here is, when they say like, stay in your lane, that's kind of like can be used in a negative term, like, oh, stay in your lane. I'm saying it in the positive frame of like, really just be relentless in pursuit of the next right step within your lane. So if you see and show up what's needed today, and show up even when you don't feel like it, and really just be like, what is needed here? What's the creative, like it's like a channel of creativity that has to happen. And to me, it's like, if you honor and are loyal to that channel, then fruition will flow from that. So that to me is what happened. Like, I don't really know. When I look back, it's kind of crazy. All of this stuff has happened, but it really is just doing the same thing, and an outflow. Like, for Eckhart Tolle, the author, said, outflow determines inflow. And I think that that's a good way, a succinct way of putting it.
Yeah, this is powerful, because in the business world, you just gave some great advice. I always tell people to honor your craft, and that's really what you're doing. You're just digging deeper into what you do, like you're specializing and concentrating your efforts, which a lot of people are not really doing today, right? We want to be like a serial entrepreneur and doing everything, but like, if you can get more concentrated and dig deeper, you can provide more to that area of this world that needs your expertise. So I love that. I love, you have this saying of every meal is an opportunity to nourish wellness or erode it. And when you said there is no neutral food, I wanted to ask you, because a lot of us, we are slowly abusing our bodies. And I wanted to ask you about, in terms of people waking up and gaining more insight in their health, and like, what is better to do? What are like people that they should reach out to? Is it their doctor that they should speak to? And what if their doctor isn't giving them the right information? In your book, you had mentioned that they in medical school, you get 19 hours out of 4 years in nutrition training. So what if our doctor isn't saying necessarily the right things and is giving us, a prescription drug to cure our sickness, and we want to go and seek some different advice? How does someone maneuver with that right now, when you are saying that a meal is an opportunity to nourish it? Do we go back to food? Do we go back to nutrition, or do we seek other medical advice?
I think it depends on what the person's goals are, where their intuition is leading them, and what is their baseline. Where are they at right now, right? And I think that a few scenarios that come to mind. One scenario is, well, let me just say that the half glass full perspective is that now more than ever, mainstream conventional doctors are aware of this stuff and are actually quite collaborative and quite positive and quite beautifully collaborative, I guess is the way of putting it. Like, I can't tell you, 12 years ago, this never happened. But
That's
today,
really good to hear. I
yeah,
never
I know.
thought that.
I'm on like three-way Zooms with somebody's PCP or
That's so
endocrinologist or
amazing to hear.
rheumatologist, and we're collaborating with it. That's what healthcare should be. Like, the medical God complex and the med-splaining, as I call it, which is like mansplaining only with somebody's health, the medical gaslighting that's going on, it's still so pervasive and honestly gross, but it's like a dying, archaic archetype that's sort of like going away. I feel like it's still going to probably always be here because it's a very monolithic, powerful industry. And we have, patriarchal problems as a whole anyways. It's a part of that. But I do feel like there's pockets of light that are growing. And it's really born out of doctors that want to help people. That's why they got into healthcare. And then they're realizing, dang, the system is really limited on what I could do. And look, it doesn't have to be either or. And it shouldn't be either or. It should be both and. And I think that's why brilliant institutions like the Cleveland Clinic, which is very mainstream and very cutting edge and very conventional, they have a functional medicine center. And the Institute for Functional Medicine, who's trained the doctors at the Cleveland Clinic's Functional Medicine Center, and that's who's trained myself and my team and anybody that's IFM trained. So that is not just the Cleveland Clinic. There are many mainstream institutions that have functional medicine centers. They are not spending multi-million dollars on these institutions, on these functional medicine centers based off of quackery or like woo-woo. This is the evidence is pointing that this is not only saving lives, it's improving quality of life, and it's saving money, because when you get people healthy, you don't have to pay for sick care and disease. So should be common sense. This should be the most uncontroversial thing ever. And if it's controversial to somebody, that says more about them than the wellness. So it should be very, very normalized. We're talking about people reclaiming their health, and you'd have to be pretty nefarious a person, whether it be a doctor or a layperson, a family member, to be against somebody feeling better and their labs improving. And normally what I see from patients, mainstream doctors, even if they don't understand it, what I hear is this exact sentence: whatever you're doing, keep on doing it. Because who can really argue with normalizing blood sugar, normalizing lipids, lowered inflammation levels, improving health outcomes? I mean, this is like all good stuff. So if your doctor is shaming you or medically gaslighting you, I would say you have two options at that point. Do you just quote unquote use the system for what you need, i.e. your checkups, your medications that you have to be on maybe for a time or forever? Do you just play the game, or is it not worth it for you? And you just like, you know what, this is really out of line here, and this is bringing me a lot of stress, and they're not on the same page as me. And at that point, I would just encourage you to get a new doctor, because there are many mainstream doctors that may not be trained in functional medicine, but are still open to collaborating with you and figuring out the best tools within your toolbox.
Yes, I love this. I actually was studying to be a doctor before I got into business. And one of the things that was really intriguing to me was I did a lot of volunteer work in cardiac units. And in my mind, I thought I was going to help people, make them more healthy. But then when I worked in the hospitals and I volunteered in cancer units too, I'm like, this isn't what I thought medicine was all about. And so speaking to the next generation, like how do we improve the world? I think it's through working with young people and inspiring them. How does someone today get interested about having a career in functional medicine? What is the path? Like, do you go to traditional medical school and then get specialized training? How does that work?
Yeah, that's normally how it looks like. I mean, there's the Institute for Functional Medicine trains all different types of physicians. So there's MDs, DCs, LACs, DOs, NDs, nurse practitioners, NPs, that are all trained within their space, psychiatrists as well. And they are doing postdoctorate education and training, and they have a full certification process that takes years to get certified in that. And there's a lot of other postdoctorate training as well, that are also, I would say, maybe functional medicine adjacent, that have their own functional medicine training. But the gold standard, in my opinion, is the Institute for Functional Medicine, and that is very much entrenched in what I'll tell you what's going on with the Cleveland Clinic's Functional Medicine Center, but also what's going on in Washington, D.C. Recently, they had a big health symposium at the White House, and IFM was very much involved with that, political affairs. So yeah, that's really the route they would go. They just go to functionalmedicine.org for information there if they already are a physician or some sort of clinician. But look, I would want to encourage, this is time now more than ever for health coaches, people that are not doctors, they're not clinicians, but they want to learn about this stuff. So that's most doctors, like my team here is filled with brilliant functional diagnostic nutrition practitioners and health coaches and people that are just honestly, no shade to mainstream doctors, but they're smarter than most doctors are when it comes to nutrition, and they are brilliant. So you don't necessarily have to be a doctor to go down the route of learning about functional medicine and functional nutrition as a whole. So I would encourage you to look at places like the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, IAN. They recently redid their entire curriculum. I'm on the teaching faculty there, the visiting faculty there. IAN, Mind Body Green, who've been longtime friends of mine, They have their new functional nutrition coaching program, which I teach for them as well. So a lot of these online courses are really great. And the statistics show a lot of the people that go through those coaching programs online, they don't even end up doing it professionally, but they do it to enrich their life, to be empowered for themselves, which I think is really beautiful. So whether you end up being a health coach or not, this can really bring some edification, I think, in your life and in your family's life.
Wow, I think that's so great. I would recommend that everyone get your books. I know you have a new one coming out, Gut Feelings, and I think that a lot of us really need to tap into this where we don't feel right, something is off. That's why I would read your book on inflammation too, like the inflammation spectrum. But then when I look forward to I've already pre-ordered it and I look
Thank you.
forward to getting Gut Feelings because I think for me, it's just all interconnected. And I thank you for your work. I thank you for your time today. Where can the audience go if they want to hear more information, if they want to see if they could be a potential patient of yours? I'm thinking like, I want to be a patient of yours.
Come on.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So,
Let's go.
yeah. So where do we go to learn more about you and what you do, so we can become healthier and optimal?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. It really means a lot. So everything's at drwillcole.com. That's drwillcole.com. They can go to the Become a Patient consultation page, all the links to my podcast, The Art of Being Well. There's 2 episodes every week, Monday and Thursday. There's a new episode. And you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. But the links to the podcast is at drwillcole.com. The links to the books, we have lots of free content, like hundreds and hundreds of articles that I mentioned I've written are all there. And the book, Gut Feelings, thanks for mentioning that. The subtitle is How Healing the Shame-Fueled Relationship Between What You Eat and How You Feel. So I'm so excited for this book to come out. We're talking about that bi-directional relationship between mental health and physical health. So we're talking about gut and feelings and this sort of duality between the two, the physiological and the psychological, and the interconnectedness of the two. And the research around shame is astounding, of chronic stress, trauma, intergenerational trauma, and how that impacts your physiology, i.e. raises inflammation. And that's all sort of the non-food inflammers that I talk about in that book. And then conversely, like I mentioned in today's conversation, underlying gut problems and hormonal imbalances and different sorts of physiological disruption impacts our mood and how our brain works, and things like anxiety and mood swings and depression and things like that. So yeah, it's for pre-order now. We're giving away free signed books and tons of free stuff if people pre-order Gut Feelings now at drwillcole.com.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Will Cole, for your time today. We appreciate it.